Hello, everybody. Welcome to Church History. Today is our second lesson. We're going to be talking all about the Franks. Who were the Franks? Why are they important? And then we are going to be talking about specifically about three kings of the Franks and kind of the transition from the end of the Roman Empire into the medieval church, the one where, Christendom is really ascendant and on top, and you have these very powerful popes. And you have kind of people conquering in the name of Christianity. So we kind of talked about the beginnings of that with Constantine. We talked about how Christianity went from a rogue religion that was illegal to becoming the favored religion of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire falls, but Christianity continues on. It continues on in the Byzantine Empire, which we talked about last time. But let's shift back into the Western Roman Empire, or at least the ruins of it, with the Franks. So who are the Franks? Well, basically the country that is now known as France gets its name from the Franks. They were a Germanic tribe that conquered modern-day France, which used to be called Gaul, but now is called France. And France, the name of it, comes from the people who conquered it, the Franks. Much like how England will be named after the Angles, which were another tribe that conquered it and made it England or England over time. That's where France gets its name from. So Clovis is the king of the Franks in 509. Remember, the Roman Empire fell in 476. So this is just about 30 years after that. He converted to Christianity because of his wife, who he ended up marrying, was a Christian. He ended up becoming a Christian himself, but he ended up not being the best Christian himself. He killed a lot of Christians and non-Christians in his wars of conquest. He was mainly interested in conquest, and that meant Christian or non-Christian. That's what ended up happening. Interestingly enough, remember that the tribes that ended up conquering the Roman Empire were themselves Christians by the time they conquered Rome. So Christianity is really ascendant in all of Western Europe at this time. From this time on, whole tribes became Christians when their king did. So when Clovis converted to Christianity, so did his whole army and everyone who was part of the Frankish tribe. They ended up joining Christianity because of that. And remember, there's a declining in learning and literacy and understanding of all the tenets of Christianity. So people will say that they're nominally Christians, but they won't really act like it. And Clovis is one of the key examples of that. One of the popes who was during this time, a little bit later, kind of after the fall of the Roman Empire, who kind of characterized how powerful the pope was really becoming, was this guy. His name is Pope Gregory. He said he was the servant of the servants of God. He symbolized kind of the medieval church. He assumed broad political powers. He appointed the heads of cities. He even raised armies and made peace treaties. So he's acting more or less like a king rather than the bishop, rather than the leader of the church in Rome, which is what the Pope is supposed to be. He's more acting like a political and military leader. And he was teaching many things that would kind of characterize the medieval church as well. He said that the Lord's Supper is a repetition of the sacrifice of Christ. He said that the saints can help all of us and that there is a purgatory. So he was one of those people who was focusing on the existence of purgatory, in, reverence for all the saints that had come before, and, kind of emphasizing the ritual parts of Christianity as opposed to the whole relational aspect with the Trinity, or with having a personal relationship with God. And during Pope Gregory's time, it's more about kind of the rituals that will sort of become key parts of Christianity moving forward, especially during the medieval times when not many people can read and understand some of the arguments of St. Paul in the New Testament. Alright, the rise of Islam happens during this time. I know you guys have learned a lot about this in world history and in world religions too, so here's your quick review. The Prophet Muhammad, he starts his own religion in the city of Mecca in 632. He quickly unites many Arabian tribes into a singular fighting force. This is one of my favorite stories in world history. The rise of Islam is amazing to learn about when you learn about how all this division and all these different tribes united under this one guy, the Prophet Muhammad. He was a very unlikely candidate to be a military leader, but he somehow pulls it off, and out of nowhere comes this empire, this religious empire. So it was an interesting development because something like this had never really happened before or since in the same way. They take over the whole entire Arabian Peninsula, what is now known as the Middle East, places like modern-day Israel and Syria and Egypt. All these places that had, their ancient past, of course, with, I could put Persia down there too, but all these places that had an ancient past, something like ancient Egypt, Israel, Syria, Persia, all these places that used to have like empires, but they were slowly, or actually quickly at this time, they were quickly kind of taken over by Islamic ideals. And so even a place like Egypt today is still Islamic, the vast majority. It's pretty interesting. Here's a map just to show you about the rapid expansion of Islam. You see that there's the conquest at the death of Muhammad in 632. That's the orange down here in Arabia. If you can see my mouse, there it is. And then you can see the conquest of the first four caliphs, or the successors to Muhammad. That's all of this in North Africa in pink. You have the rest of the Middle East here in places like modern-day Iraq and Iran here in what's used to be called Persia. And then all these places like Jerusalem, Damascus, Aleppo, all these places here. And these were places that used to be ruled, if you remember, by the Byzantine Empire, which is severely shrunk at this time. The Byzantine Empire lost a lot of territory to the first four caliphs and to the Islamic Caliphate, or Caliphate. I've heard it both ways. I grew up hearing it called the Caliphate. So this was basically the entire community of Muslims, because Islam is different in a lot of ways than Christianity, because politics and religion is very much intermingled in a way that Christianity is more different than politics. Not at this time, though, but that will come a little bit later. And this just goes to show how much it extended all through northern Africa here. Here's the Sahara Desert, but up here in the Mediterranean area of northern Africa, swept all of these places and even went into Spain. This will become very important. This whole area of future Spain and Portugal here is going to be under control of Muslims, and this will be for I think about 800 years. There's going to be a caliphate here in Cordoba, which is a city here in Spain. And you can see this is where Barcelona will be later. You have France right here. So you have Muslims living very close to French Christians right here. So this is also why Spain will turn out to be a much different country than France and England later in history, because Spain has this history of being conquered by the Muslims for almost 800 years, and it has a very distinct style because of that. You can see here's an example of architecture in Islamic Spain. This is Cordoba, which is going to become a famous city later. And there's such a rapid expansion of the Muslims throughout this whole area. So you can see here that there's actually a famous battle that will take place. It's called the Battle of Tours, and this is a key battle that happened in world history in 732. The Muslims sweep from northern Africa all the way up to Spain to a French city called Tours. Charles Martel, who's the king of the Franks at the time, he fights and wins and basically drives off the Muslims back to Spain. So they got up, so they were conquered this whole area and were actually going to go into Europe itself, but they were actually repelled in the Battle of Tours. And it's one of those historical watermarks. It's a what-if scenario. What if What if the Franks lost the Battle of Tours? Well, it's possible that the Islamic religion, the Muslim religion, would take over a lot of Western Europe, and we'd be living in a very different world. So when it comes to key battles throughout history that would change things in the future, this battle is one of those key ones in 732. The last person that we're going to be talking about this unit, who kind of exemplifies this whole time period in history after the fall of the Roman Empire, is this guy, Charlemagne. He is considered the most powerful king in Frankish history. The Pope actually crowned him, so this just goes to show that it's the Pope who's actually putting the crown on the emperor's head. It's not, it's like they're being crowned by the religious authority. The religious authority is still going to be considered number one during this time. So Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans. Just a title, not actually. The Roman Empire has not returned, but there was kind of this longing for it to return, that people wanted the Roman Empire to come back in some way, and they thought Charlemagne was the guy to do it. He ended up conquering quite a vast amount of Western Europe, and they thought, hey, this is close enough to the Roman Empire, so they decided to call him the Emperor of the Romans. This was in the year 800. He forced Christian institutions to educate people. He forced conversions by the sword and used Christian missions to expand his kingdom. So this just goes to show how Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, underground, in secret, through convincing people, through ideas. And then during this part, during the Middle Ages, you're going to convert people by force, by violence. This is going to be the way it's going to be for a long time, until the Reformation kind of changes all of that. So we're setting up to the time in history like the Crusades. We're going to be talking about the medieval church at the height of its power and influence, where the Pope is going to have so much control over kings and governments and things like this, to where they start going way off course, way off track for what Christianity actually teaches, what Jesus actually taught back in, the year 30 AD, where we've gone so far off course. And so that's what really the Protestant Reformation is going to come in to kind of make us think about what's really important in Christianity. So we are setting ourselves up for that. So join us next time, the next unit, where we're going to be talking about the Crusades, and we're going to be talking about what that was all about. All right, I hope you join me then.